So Dale joined the BCEA team in 2008. As the president and CEO, he's responsible for leading the association through the development of programs and initiatives to support communities and economic development organizations. With over 24 years of economic development experience, Dale has successfully developed several award-winning economic development programs, developed strategies and other initiatives in small and large communities. His excellent working relationships with all levels of government and industry associations have helped to ensure that BCEDA is well positioned to provide member services. Dale works extensively with other organizations, including the International Economic Development Council as a course instructor, and with the other provincial economic development associations developing partnerships across Canada. Thanks very much for joining us, Dale. I'm just going to flip the presentation over to you. And you should have the option to share your screen now.
Can you see the presentation there, Josh?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Josh, and the rest of the team there, and thanks everybody for joining in on this on the presentation of the BC Economic Atlas. We've been talking with different folks from the ministry, probably going on over a year now, just about the BC Economic Atlas and some of the work that it's doing. I've had the opportunity to have some sneak peeks at it and over time, and I like the way things have progressed, and I think it's a great tool for economic developers and for communities in general as we move forward to promote economic development in the province. Of course, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that BCEA is shut that down. BCEA is not BCEDA with the D missing. It's a lot more powerful. I know it's hard to believe, but it's a lot more powerful than BCEDA is. The economic development, it's a really competitive game, and many of you attended the marketing course that was just held in Vancouver following the BC Economic Summit, and you found a lot out about economic development, marketing, and attraction. But frankly, it's economic development is a very competitive game, and to try to attract investment to your communities, it is difficult. And you need to have that information to be a leg above other organizations. There's 17,000 economic development organizations alone in North America, and over 70,000 economic development associate or organizations worldwide. And so you're competing for what is very few economic development activity that actually does happen on a regular basis. The BCEA is an important piece of that toolbox, and it will help you as you're working with investors, industry, and government to see activity happen in your region. 97% of all site selection is now conducted online, and so it's critical that you as a community have comprehensive websites, but also access to interactive tools like the BC Economic Atlas provides, and we'd encourage you to provide information to that, and I'm sure that they'll show you how to do that as we do the webinar today. You can actually give yourself a 150% advantage when businesses are evaluating a long list of locations. It doesn't just come down to your community, it's hundreds of communities that they'll be looking at. The tool can help you in your planning, your researching and analyzing projects and proposals. I actually think it can actually help you in your strategic planning, your community planning, and other planning projects that you have in your communities. It can produce maps and project files that you can share. You can download these files and you can share these files. You can access provincial data through a single user interface. You can actually assist in First Nation consultation by identifying First Nations in an interest area, and it combines information from various sources, including your own sources. You'll have the ability to upload various pieces of information to the site as time goes on. It highlights major projects in the geographic region that you're in. It enables you to analyze and share the economic development land attributes in comparison to provincial data, so that much broader comparison that you can now provide. You have the ability to showcase relevant information from your local government. So I know that, I'm not sure if this is Squamish up here, or Surrey, but I know that their zoning bylaws or the zoning designations have been uploaded into the system, which really helps in identifying where certain things can happen in a community. And the tool has been designed to allow for the creation of new tools, new additions that can be added as time goes on. We've been encouraging the province to develop these types of tools, and we're really pleased to see them do this. When we look at our neighbors to the south, and we look at our even provinces to the east, more so Ontario than anybody else, but they have got similar types of tools, and now we are what I think actually with this site can be almost seen as a bit of a leader when it comes to the type of information that the province has made available. We've heard from a lot of site selectors and others that BC, needs to do more to provide information to the investment community, and so we're really pleased again to see this happen. It makes us more competitive, and just in closing, just encourage you to learn and to use the site to your advantage. We're all in this together, and so work together and make sure you're using this site as part of your tools. I'll pass it over now to Luke.
Great, thanks very much, Dale. Really appreciate your insights there, and certainly really happy to work with BCEA on some of the feedback you've provided and that. So I'm going to reintroduce Luke again. I neglected to read his bio, and he's a pretty cool dude. So I'm going to take the time to tell you a little bit about him. So an economic analyst in JTSD's cross-sector initiatives branch, Luke Gallimberti has been with the BC Public Service for over 10 years, including time with the Ministries of Health and Education. He holds a BA in Professional Communication and also serves as president of the Victoria Multicultural Society. When not working or volunteering, Luke spends his time cooking pretty well, fly fishing poorly, and playing the violin very poorly, although I can't lay claim to to being present to any of those. So Luke, I'll pass it on to you to give you a chance to talk about the tool in a bit more of an overview.
Great, thanks Josh, and for the record, you're lucky you've never heard me play. So I'm just going to give you, Josh is going to enable my screen here. And there you are. Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to move into our presentation here about what exactly the BCEA is, how it does, or how it works, and what it does. So before the British Columbia Economic Atlas, government was providing spatial information and data and web mapping applications across numerous business areas, but those efforts were typically very siloed and the applications didn't talk to one another. So that really limited the usefulness of the information and left very little opportunity for efficient data integration, and the burden was placed on our clients to source and integrate information from multiple sources. So BCEA is driving to change that by making it easier for clients to access publicly available government data in one place. So before the Economic Atlas, information of interest to investors was scattered through numerous websites. There was also multiple data formats to deal with, such as spreadsheets, documents, and reports. In addition, information was not spatialized. For example, the major projects were documented quarterly in a report, but not visible on a map. So this made it really difficult to analyze and view information in relation to other geographic features. And it was really challenging and time-consuming to have conversations with clients and move towards decision-making. So now with the BC Economic Atlas, clients need to visit just one place to access the same information. So what is BCEA exactly and how does it work? Well, it's a user-friendly web-based application that integrates and displays economic and natural resource data on a map to support investment and opportunity identification, business case analysis, research, and decision-making. The Atlas provides access to dozens of information sources, including major projects inventory, Work BC, and Destination BC, amongst many, many others. BCEA improves the way that users are able to access mapped information from multiple data sources, identify, visualize, and promote business opportunities, conduct project scoping and business case analysis, and facilitate informed conversations with clients. Our target audiences when developing this tool included external users such as potential foreign investors, small to large businesses, entrepreneurs, turnkey investors, business associations, local governments, First Nations, job seekers, and even tourists. Internally, the BCEA is improving the way that the government is able to communicate economic development activity and market business opportunities. It enables public access to spatial information that supports identification of economic development opportunities and share and utilize spatial information to inform decision making. So now comes the tricky part of the presentation, so I'm going to bow out and let Dan take control. So Dan, it's over to you.
Great.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
So
Dan Herner is a planning and analyst specialist with the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism, and Skills Training. And he is with the Cross-Sector Initiatives branch in Vancouver. He received a bachelor's degree in geography and certificate in spatial information systems from Simon Fraser University, as well as an associate certificate in leadership from the BC Institute of Technology. Dan has been with the BC Public Service for more than 15 years and has been fortunate to have a range of diverse experiences such as defining land use zone as part of the Central Coast Land and Resource Management Plan, supervising volunteers during the 2010 Winter Olympics, working with First Nations to define consultation boundaries, and leading analysis used to redistribute the provincial electoral districts. Dan sees himself as a builder and is passionate about connecting people to innovative tools and information to help improve decision making. Away from work, Dan enjoys marathon running, learning about French wine, and barbecuing over charcoal. He currently resides in North Van with his wife Joanna and his energetic daughters Ava and Mia. And Dan can be contacted at daniel.herner@gov.bc.ca, and you can connect with him near the end of the webinar. We can put up that contact information again if you have any specific questions. So Dan, I'm just going to flip over control to you. And you should be able to share your screen at any time. There you have it.
All right. Thanks very much for that introduction, Josh. Yeah, my name is Dan Herner. I also like gardening. I didn't add that to my bio, but I do like gardening as well. So I'm going to launch into a bit of a slide presentation here showing how you could use the Economic Atlas, and then I'm going to go into a live demo, a more detailed demo about how you can actually use the tools. So the BC Economic Atlas can be launched from the URL www.gov.bc.ca/economic-atlas. If you don't want to write anything down in the webinar today, you can just Google for BC Economic Atlas, and it should be the first search result that you receive. When you get to the home page there, the BC Economic Atlas homepage, it provides a brief description. Much of what you've heard today will be on that website, as well as there's help tools in the form of a tutorial document. There's answers to frequently asked questions and a feedback form available for users. So if you have any questions or any comments, you can enter them through the feedback form. My understanding is this webinar is going to be recorded, and our hope is that once that recording is published, we'll be able to add that link to our Economic Atlas homepage as well. So moving right into the demo, once you launch the Economic Atlas, the first thing you'll probably want to do is you'll want to add data, relevant data, and you can do this in multiple ways. The first way is through the DataBC catalog. The DataBC catalog accesses the provincial BC Geographic Warehouse, which is our corporate repository of spatial information that holds hundreds of data sets. And these data sets may be relevant to specific users, and there's a broad range of information there from socioeconomic, base mapping, licensing and permits, land ownership and status, government services, ecological inventories, and imagery, just to name a few. The second way to add data to the Economic Atlas is through locally stored spreadsheets in CSV format, and that's a format that can be opened up in Excel, as well as KML files. KML files are commonly known as Google Earth files, so that type of data can be added to the Economic Atlas as well as GIS shapefiles. GIS shapefiles are a very common GIS shapefile. So these data sets can be from private desktop folders or publicly accessible open data sources, as well as published web mapping services. And what this means is that the user can combine their own proprietary data with publicly available data to inform their business or investment decisions. And the third way to add data to the Economic Atlas, and the way that I find most exciting because it's a piece of the Economic Atlas that we can sort of configure on the fly, and that's the BC Economic Atlas layer menu. The layer menu provides an easier access to a subset of information that is relevant to economic development, business and job opportunities, and natural resource sector decision making. The map layers in the BC Economic Atlas layer menu are largely organized by jobs plan sectors and other themes relevant to economic development. I'm going to go into more details about how to add data when I go through the live demo. So I'm just going to show a few slides about some of the potential things that can be done with the BC Economic Atlas. In this first slide here, we have looking at the northwest of BC on the map. It's a bit of a regional overview, looking at major projects, parks and conservancy areas, First Nations reserves, municipalities, regional districts, as well as the Nisga'a treaty lands. So considering a hypothetical scenario of a user interested in developing a potential industrial site north of Kitimat, that sort of posed or potential site is a sort of red polygon that you see in the top left of your screen. They may want to start off by investigating key site criteria, and they could explore site topography by adding a hillshade dataset. In this case, on the top left, the user sees that the potential site is relatively flat and could be easy to build on. Infrastructure can also be explored to assess whether the site has necessary access to critical infrastructure such as roads, rails, power line, airports, ports, etc., depending on the type of project. In the bottom left there, it's taking a look at land ownership. So land ownership can be identified by adding the cadastral fabric. And in this case, there are several survey parcels in pink within the potential site. And these are all under Crown ownership, the pink polygons. And again, data, of course, can be displayed at different scales. For example, 1 to 250,000 regional transportation perspective with access to roads, railway, airports, etc. Or you can drill down to like a 1 to 20,000 perspective for more detailed site planning, site-specific planning purposes. The BC Economic Atlas can also be used to assess whether there are any legally or otherwise specified encumbrances that might impact how a site can be used. Examples of some of these encumbrances could be agricultural land reserve, legal old growth management areas, forestry cut blocks, community forests, parks and protected areas, and community watersheds. For example, a user can look at Crown land tenures and tenure applications in the area and then use analysis tools to gather information on specific tenures that may need to be considered when moving the project forward. In the case of our hypothetical user, the potential site falls within Crown tenure, designated as a reserve for industrial use. And of course, users can look at different encumbrances and different data sets on the land base cumulatively, or they can look at the data set separately depending on their requirements. So once the user has selected or analyzed map information, they can, of course, export this information to spreadsheet format in CSV, which is readable through Excel, or they can also export their analysis in a GIS shapefile for sharing or for future analysis in their own systems. They can take what they've mapped and add project details by drawing shapes and adding text to the map as well. Of course, they can save their sessions, so it's not just a one-time thing. The work that you've done in Atlas can be saved in a file that can be stored and then shared with others or opened at another time, and that will reopen the Economic Atlas exactly where you left off. And of course, it wouldn't be a web mapping application without the ability to produce a map, and the Economic Atlas can do that. It can export maps to PDF format, which of course can be used to print or to share or to store for future use. As Dale mentioned in his presentation, the Economic Atlas can also be used to discover First Nation information, which is of high importance. We've recently added the ability to create reports from the Ministry of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation's First Nations Consultative Area Database, and that database can be used to determine preliminary contact information for First Nations who may have Aboriginal interests in an identified area. And you can also review treaty area and treaty-related lands through those map layers that are available in the BC Economic Atlas layer menu. Continuing on the First Nations theme, you can explore information about First Nations communities, companies, and economic development agreements and the relationship to major projects. The interesting thing about these data sets is that they're being consumed live from an external source. It's coming from the Aboriginal Business and Investment Council's First Nations Economic Development Database, and that database can be accessed. It's a public database. It can be accessed at the URL fnebb.ca. That's fnebb.ca. Or you can access a link to that database as well from the Aboriginal Business and Investment Council website, which is available at bcabic.ca. That's bcabic.ca. So those are just a couple of examples before I launch into my live demo of how the Economic Atlas can be used to support the identification and visualization and promotion of business opportunities, which can be used for project scoping and business case analysis, hopefully to inform, facilitate conversations among project proponents, business owners, First Nations, and government decision makers. So now let's get into a real demo and show you how to use the tool. I'm going to flip over my screen here, and hopefully this all comes across. So hopefully right now you're seeing on your screen the home page for the Economic Atlas. As I mentioned, that's available at www.gov.bc.ca/economic atlas, or if you just Google for BC Economic Atlas, as I mentioned. So on the home page, you'll see there's links to how the Economic Atlas works, answers to frequently asked questions. There's a user guide here that can be downloaded. It's a bit of a tutorial. And there's a feedback form, as I mentioned. So if you have enhancement requests, or if there's an issue or a question or other, you can submit those here, and the Economic Atlas team will receive those emails. So going back to the Economic Atlas page here, if you click here, it should launch the application. So the Economic Atlas does require a Microsoft Silverlight plugin, and it will work on most desktop operating systems and most browsers. We are considering the development of the Economic Atlas in HTML5, which would allow for access on all platforms, including mobile devices. So let's start off by exploring the interface layout. So on the left side here, we have the information panel, and this describes primary methods to load data onto the map, the layers on the map, and the results of searching the map, as well as options to export data from selected features. On the top right here, we have the search box, and the search box will search for features on the map either by location, by address, by place name, or by map service. If you just want to search by address, you can turn off the place name or the map service checkbox here. Over here, we have an I want to menu. The I want to menu is a menu of shortcuts to frequently used tools, including all the tools for adding data to the map. If you right-click anywhere in the map window, you get a shortcut to common tasks as well, including the very popular What's Here function. This tool acts in the same way as our point identify tool in the core tools, which I'll show you in a few seconds. To access the toolbar can be accessed in 3 ways. So here I click the screwdriver wrench icon on the top right here, and it accesses the toolbar. The toolbar is grouped by toolbar functions and by tabs. And as I mentioned, there's 3 ways to access the toolbar. The first way there by the icon, if you double click on the header image, that will access the toolbar as well. And then in the I want to menu, you can access the toolbar by showing the toolbar there. Over here, just let me close that. Over here we have base maps. Base maps show background reference information on the map. Base maps do not participate in any searching or querying. The base maps right now include a topographic view, an imagery view, a street view, as well as a terrain view. And we are considering adding OpenStreetMaps as well as an additional base map. So now I'm going to go and take a look at some of the tools and what you can do with them. Moving over into the toolbar, you can see I opened it up through the toolbar icon there. They are these core tools, and these core tools are present no matter what toolbar you have selected. You have access to these 4 core tools. The first tool here is very common in mapping applications. It's the pan tool, which allows you to move the map around at the current scale. The point identify tool, as I mentioned, it's the same as right-clicking and saying what's here. And if you click the point identify tool on the map, it'll tell you what feature is present. So here we have this our economic regions, which are a default layer when you open up the economic atlas. As you can see, it's highlighted that because it has intersected that point that I added to the map. We have a rectangle identify tool. It works in the same way, but allows you to draw a box, and it will return back the features that are queried for that particular area. So moving over, we have the BC Economic Atlas layer menu. As I mentioned, I'm really excited about showing you this. This is our configurable pick list of map layers that can be added to your map. So the way this works is you can explore the layer groups here. The layer groups also have descriptions, which you can toggle on and toggle off. We have information on employment and investment. I'm just going to kind of step through and show you some of the information quickly that's in the economic layer menu. So there's Work BC information, employment, service office locations. We have major projects data. There's three main major projects data sets in the province right now. There's the BC major projects inventory. We have natural resource sector major projects, as well as major projects coming from the Environmental Assessment Office if those projects are part of an EAO process. There's data around natural gas and oil, and information on tourism, HelloVC information around parks and trails. We have lots of information on mining, different mineral potential data sets and mineral claims and mineral tenures. There's information on energy. Real key data set is a transmission line, which is coming out from BC Hydro. As well, we have agricultural data, lots of forestry data in the province, so there's lots of forestry information that we brought into the layer menu. And then into physical infrastructure, this is where we have things like rights-of-way, transmission lines again, as well as roads and rail as well. Moving into First Nations information, we have, as I mentioned, data coming directly from the First Nations Economic Development Database. So this is not internal to BC government. This data is streaming live from the First Nations database. As well, we have success stories coming from the Aboriginal Business and Investment Council website and First Nations reserves, as well as treaty-related data. Under conservation, lots of data around parks and protected areas, wildlife habitat areas, and old growth management areas. Land status and ownership, this is where you're going to get your crown tenure information, as well as the integrated cadastral fabric around private ground type ownership. And then for administrative boundaries, you can see that there's regional districts, municipalities, and then various sort of provincial level regional boundaries that we use as well. And then, of course, there's some education data as well, school facilities, school districts, and we even have family and immigration data around service providers and child care. Francophone services, so if you've got clients or that are looking for information around Francophone data, we have some data there as well. And this is one of the ones that Dale mentioned. We are now streaming data from some local governments, depending on the formats that they provide. We have data from the City of Surrey, as well as Port Metro Vancouver and District of Squamish. So that's kind of exciting because that's, I think, one of the key differences between this mapping application and some of the other ones that we've built in the province is that this one is designed to consume information from external sources as well and showcase that through our one window approach here. And then there's some base mapping information around freshwater. So I'll just kind of go through and show you how I would add information to the map. If I kind of try and mimic that map that I had for encumbrances, I'll bring some of that information in. So under physical infrastructure, I'd like to look at transmission lines, and I'm looking for the digital road atlas as well. There we go, and I'll probably turn off the census economic regions because I don't need those anymore. Under First Nations, I'll add the First Nations reserve. Under conservation, I'm going to add parks and as well as protected areas. Under land status and ownership, I'm going to look at adding crown tenures by purpose, as well as I'm interested in crown ownership. And under administrative boundaries, I'm going to add the municipalities. And maybe I will also add, under agriculture, the agricultural land reserve. So as you can see, I've quite easily added these to my selected layers. If there's a layer or data set that you decide you don't want to add, you can just remove it like that, or you can re-add it. So it's a plus and minus system. You can also add an entire layer group by clicking the Add All. If you come across a layer group that has a lot of data in it, you don't want to toggle up and down, you can turn off the layer descriptions, which makes it a little bit easier to see exactly what's in that data set. I'll show you as well, if you're looking to search for a data set and you're not sure what it would be called, you can filter for layers. So I turned on this All Layers group, and now if I was interested in forest data, it'll search for anything with the keyword forest in it. So I've added those to my selected layers, and I'm going to click Finish. And that was a really long description about how to use the layer menu. Hopefully all that data is added now. Okay, so it comes on pretty quick. As I mentioned, it's coming from different sources. It's coming from a database, and in some cases multiple databases, depending on what you've added to the map. You'll see that some of these data sets are grayed out. That means that they're scale dependent, and they'll turn on depending on what scale dependency is set by the data custodian. It's a real key thing to mention, again, is that for the most part, we do not own any of the data, unless it's JATST data, or Ministry of Job Search and Skills Training data, the ministry that I work for. This data is all managed by the custodian and housed in our spatial repository, the BC Geographic Warehouse. So that was the economic layer menu. Now I'm going to continue on with going through some of the other tools before we go back to exploring the map. So I have the navigation tab open on the map already. This tab allows for basically the ability to move around the map in different ways. So there's a common zoom in, zoom out button here. The zoom in button, it can work in, you can actually zoom into the map in quite a few different ways. So you can click the zoom in button, click once on the map and it'll zoom you in, or you can highlight an area by clicking on your mouse and drawing a box and it'll zoom into that area. You can also use your mouse wheel. So if I roll forward on my mouse wheel, it will zoom in, and if I or roll backwards on my mouse wheel, it will zoom out of the map. You can also zoom in and out using the slide zoom toggler, zoom toggle on the left side of the map window here, either by hitting the plus or minus or by sliding up and down on the toggle. You can also use the plus or minus keys on your keyboard to zoom in and out of the map. So those two tools work identical, just zooming in and zooming out. If you get to a point and you're maybe you zoomed in too far, you're not really sure where you are, you can always hit the full extent button, and that'll take you back to the full extent of the province of BC. If you want to go back to the previous extent, you can hit the previous extent, which will zoom you back to where you were, and then the next extent will take you forward one map extent to where you left off before the previous extent. So these two kind of work like a backwards and forwards. Over here we have the ability to zoom into a specific scale. You can type the scale in here, so if you are interested in viewing the map at 1 to 250,000, you can type it in there. Just keep in mind that these scales should be considered approximate due to differences in monitor size and resolution. These are to be considered approximate. Underneath that, we have the ability to add bookmarks. So if I wanted to add a bookmark, say for here, because I'm in Prince George, what I can do is I can click the plus sign and add Prince George and type OK. And so now if you look under here, I've got a Prince George bookmark saved. I've got some other bookmarks that I've pre-saved. So if I want to zoom into Victoria, I can zoom into that bookmark that I've pre-saved. I can zoom back to Prince George, or I can zoom back to the full extent of BC if I want to do that. Moving over here to our latitude, longitude, UTM coordinate zoom tools. So if you have access to, or someone has supplied you specific coordinates and you want to zoom to that location, you can see that if you click that the button there, it will ask you for specific latitude and longitude coordinates. And then you can zoom in depending on how far you want to zoom into that specific location. It'll center the map on that coordinate, and the UTM coordinate tool works the same way, just with a different coordinate system. It will be using UTMs and then the zone, and then your zoom would have to be specified by you, or the current size. Of course, there's the ability to ask for help. So we have this help button here, which if I click it here will open. It opens the technology help. The technology that Economic Atlas is based on is called GeoCortex, and that's built by a company in Victoria called Latitude Geographics. So this is their help document, and if you click on help, it will fire that up. The help is also available right beside the search, and that's present no matter whether you have the toolbar on or not. The what's this help will open the help reference for that specific tool if it's available in the viewer's technologies help document. For example, if I wanted to know more about the I want to menu, I could click on what's this help, and it'll bring me to that reference in the help guide. Okay, so now moving over to the maps and data sources tab. These tools are there to provide the ability to add data to the map, as I mentioned, in multiple ways and formats. And this is not just for adding BC government data. This is adding your own locally stored data or from your local files or open data sites. I'm going to click the first one here, which is the Add Geographic Warehouse Layer button. And that's the same as adding data from the BC Geographic Warehouse here, or also we have that, as I mentioned, under the I Want To menu. So as I mentioned, the Geographic Warehouse is a repository. It's a vast collection of data. It's managed by DataBC, and this tool can be searched by typing in through the filter here. So if you're interested, again, as I mentioned, forest, and you'll be able to find a whole whack of data related to forest. I've been told by DataBC that there's 1,500 publicly available spatial data sets. I haven't counted them, but I kind of believe if you look in here, it's vast, and there's a lot of information that can be added to the map from there. I should mention too that if you add data from the map, and this is for both the economic layer menu and for adding data from the geographic warehouse, if you add data to the map and you want to know more about the data custodian, if you right-click on the data set here, you get this metadata URL, and that will open up the Open Data Catalog, or the DataBC data catalog with a metadata record open for that particular data set. So for this one that I just clicked on here, this borehole lithology data set here, if you want to contact the sort of the data owner or custodian, it's Lavinia Zanini, and there's her email address if you have any questions about that particular data set. So that's the case for all our spatial data that's coming from the BC Geographic Warehouse. There's this metadata URL, which will point you back to that metadata record. So if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to find out more about those particular data sets, you can click the metadata URL, and that data record will open up. There's also a way for you to download the entire data set, and I'll show you some other ways to download data in a second. So that was the geographic warehouse layer. Now moving on to ArcGIS, the web mapping services layer server tool. So these are external map layers, and they're published as map services to the web. Many agencies that have web mapping capabilities, such as local governments, publish data in this way. You'd basically have a URL that referenced the data set, and you would add that here, and then click next, and you'd be able to add it to the map. City of Surrey is a good example of one that has a lot of their data published as map services. As I mentioned, shapefiles. You can add a shapefile to the map. If you are working with an agency or have GIS capabilities yourself, more than likely you're able to produce a shapefile, so you can add data to the map that way. You can also add data as a CSV file. So CSV files can be created in Excel. As long as they have a latitude and longitude coordinate column or columns, they can be added to the map. So here I have one as an example. It's the BC Public Library Systems. So I'll click Add a CSV. It'll ask me to which are the latitude and longitude columns. I do have those in there, so it sort of defaults to it. I can take a look at the data preview, so it's just a spreadsheet. But the real key thing is that it does have those latitude and longitude coordinate columns that I can't seem to find, but they are there. When I click Done, it'll go and add those to the map. It tells me that they are added successfully. If I take a look at the map, they're added at the bottom here, and they're always typically defaulted with the blue dot symbology. You can change symbology by right-clicking on any of the data sets. And for this particular data set, I have the ability to change it to clustering. If you're familiar with using like the MLS site, this clustering is very similar to what they have on there. So it's just a way to kind of filter data so you don't have the big, you just don't have all those points on the map. So that's an interesting way to take a look at the data. You can also create a heat map, and you have the ability to change what this heat map looks like. As well, you could just simply change the symbology from the blue dot to, say, a red diamond and reduce the size that way. So that's an example of bringing data in from a CSV file. And to remove it, as I mentioned, all the removing of data all takes place in the BC Economic Layer menu. When I right-click on the data set and I say Remove Layer, it'll fire up the layer menu, and you look for your data set you want to remove. Just click the X and click Finish, and it'll take that data set off the map. The other way to add data, as I mentioned, was through KML files. KML files are commonly known as Google Earth files, as I mentioned, and anybody who has access to the free Google Earth can create their own point, line, polygon files in KML using Google Earth, and then bring it into the Economic Atlas that way. The Show Layers button here acts the same way as the Show Layer button here. So if I go back to the home panel and I click Show Layers, it'll just toggle on to what layers are in the map. And in some cases, when you add data to the map, one data set may be obscuring what's underneath for another data set. So you can change the drawing order by clicking the Layer Drawing Order button up here, and then going in, and you can actually you can drag these data sets over each other depending on what order makes the most sense for the visualization that you want to produce. I'm just going to toggle over here to the Bing Maps and Google Maps buttons. So with these ones, they'll open up a new browser window with either a Bing or Google displayed wherever the BC Economic Atlas map is centered. For Google Maps, it will open up Street View if Street View is available for that particular area. And this feature works particularly well for major centers or for major roadways where Google has captured Street View. I'll just show you an example of that. I'll go back to my bookmarks here and go to Victoria. Map is centered in Victoria here. And I'll go back and take a look at clicking the Google Maps button there. I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller for you. So interestingly, when you pan around the Street View here, it shows you the point of view that a person standing on the ground would see. So for all the folks that are at 1810 Blanchard right now in Victoria, this is a way that you can kind of take a look at Google Street View in relation to BC Economic Atlas. This may have potential uses around looking at sites, more urban sites, but it has I think a real application in terms of what you can take a look at what's around a particular site. And as you pan around the map, or as you pan around the Street View, it'll move this reference as well. The maps are synchronized. So you toggle that on and off through this checkbox here in the Google Maps window. So moving over to analysis. So the analysis tab contains a variety of tools designed to search, extract, and analyze information. I'm going to start off with the simple query tool here. So I just want to, I'll say that these three tools are probably the most complex tools that we have in Atlas right now, but at the same point, I think they're quite intuitive, and hope you'll find them very useful once you start exploring the Economic Atlas. So the simple query tool can be used to write query statements to select information from a map layer of interest. For example, here I'm looking at, I'll just zoom out and I'll show you the legend. I should mention too that if you see data sets that have this sort of accordion, great accordion style with a drop down, if you click that, it'll reveal what's contained within that particular map layer. So this is the Crown Tenures by Purpose data set. You can see that the industrial is the sort of beigey color. If I want to go back to the sort of the Kitimat area here, and if I right-click and say what's here, as I mentioned, it'll do that drill down, identify, and you can see that the tenure purpose is industrial. So if I wanted to query, for example, all the polygons in this map extent that are of industrial purpose type Crown tenure, I can do that using the simple query tool, and I'll show you how I do that. So here in the query layer, I have to select the correct layer, so that's Crown Tenures by Purpose. I'd like to look for tenure purpose that equals industrial. As I start typing here, it should autocomplete, so there's industrial. And on the bottom here, there's this really important drop-down. So if I say none, it's going to search the entire data set, and I know from experience this is a really large data set, and that might take a while to run. So I would recommend just using the current extent as you're exploring data to see the different sizes. It won't give you an error. It'll just say, maxes out at 1,000 records returned. So if I say run now, it's going to select all the tenures that have a purpose of industrial within that map extent. I should also show you another way of selecting using that simple query that wasn't present in that past example. Just let me turn off these Crown tenures here because they're obscuring what I want to show you. So this green line here is the BC Hydro transmission line. So say I was interested in industrial tenures that were within a kilometer from that particular transmission line. I could do a what's here and select that transmission line. And if I right-click that transmission line and say buffer feature, I can add a markup of a buffer, a distance around that feature by a specified unit. So I'm going to say meters, and I'll do 1.5 kilometers. I'll do 1,500, and I'm going to add that as a buffer to the map. They call in this framework they call drawings or graphics. They call it markup. So I'm going to add that buffer as markup. So now I've created a buffer for that selected piece of transmission line at 1,500 meters. So going back to this simple query, if I want to select for industrial purpose Crown tenures, I can now filter it by the polygon drawing that I added to the map. So if I run that again, it's only going to select the tenures that overlap that feature. And when I've selected those features on the information panel here, it provides a list of all the features, which I can view either in this list view or in a table view. And as I mentioned, these tables or these selections can be exported, and they can be exported sort of in two ways. The first way is through CSV, which would allow you to open this table into Excel, or you can actually extract these polygons as a shapefile, and then you could bring these polygons into your own system. But just a word of caution: anytime you export data, it now becomes stale in the sense that it's timestamped from the time that you've exported it, and data sets similar to this Crown tenure data set can be highly dynamic and can be changing quite frequently. So just a little word of caution that when you are downloading data, to remember that it's only good from essentially the day that you've downloaded it, depending on, of course, on the type of data that you're downloading. So that was a simple query tool. I'll show you one more thing with the query. So you can build multiple queries within that simple query using this add a query condition, and it uses this AND operator is what it's called. So if you wanted to search for tenure purpose equals industrial and tenure purpose equals and tenure purpose equals something else like maybe what's this one here? Take a look here. So that's utilities. So if you were interested in both industrial and utility tenures, you could add a query for purpose equals utility, and I'm just going to do it to the current extent, and it will select out. Oops, should have selected the purpose. Results found. I think because I had selected them previously. Well, I think you sort of understand what I mean there. You basically, through that query tool, you should be able to select both there. I'm not sure exactly why it's not returning a result there, but it should be running. Under the advanced query, it's very similar to the simple query. It provides more operators that you can use. So you could select for, going back to that example, crown tenures, you could say crown tenures that were, oh, I know exactly why, because you can't have, this condition can't be true. So you can't have a tenure purpose that's industrial and utility. You could have something here that was a different type. So you could have tenure purpose equals industrial and tenure type equals, say, something like reserve notation, and then when you run that, it should select. So there we go. And so what I would have liked to show you was in the advanced query here, what you could do is here you would do the crown tenure purpose equals industrial, so that would look like this. Tenure purpose, add that equals industrial. Industrial, add that, and then here you would go or tenure purpose equals, so add equals utility, add that, and I'm going to keep it to the current extent and say run. And so now it'll select for those two conditions, whether it's a industrial purpose tenure or a utility purpose tenure. And of course, you can export that data either through CSV or through shapefiles. So one more query tool here is the advanced query or advanced filter tool, and this tool will allow you to filter for features that meet that required criteria, and it'll turn off all the other values. So for example, sticking with the crown tenures, if I want to only show industrial tenures on the map, I can go to tenure purpose, add that, just get rid of the default query here. Tenure purpose equals industrial. There we go. Let's say add and apply filter. And now what it's done is it's gone off and it's only selected the industrial purpose tenures that were visible on the map and turned everything else off. So those are the two most complicated query tools we have, or two most complicated tools we have in the Economic Atlas. But I think you'll understand that as you start exploring data, you'll become more familiar with it, and using these query tools become quite powerful. So now I'm going into some of these identify tools. We have a freehand identify, a line identify, and a polygon identify. And these three identify tools allow you to search for map layers for the area defined by whatever shape you draw on the map. They're very similar to the point identify and the rectangle identify, but they provide a little bit more functionality. And they do that by providing the ability to buffer the shape and also to select what map layers you want to participate in that query. So, for example, I'm going to go with with a free hand, and say there was something I wanted to follow here. Maybe I'll just follow this and do something like that. And it'll query for everything that's on the map that is intersected with that line that I drew. If I wanted to buffer that shape, I could add a buffer like this, and in the same way as I did the selection where I did the buffer and then I added buffer to markup, it also provides that functionality. So in this case, say if I wanted to do a buffer that's 2.5K and add that buffer to the map as a markup, and I'll go ahead and do that. I can also go in and take those. They appear at the bottom of the map as these drawings, and I can also turn those off as well. So those were the two identify tools and what you could do with them. And they allow you to select based on that shape and add a buffered markup to the map. Moving over to distance and area, I'm going to go back into navigation. I'm going to go to that sort of potential site that was used in the demo. And I'm going to turn back on the integrated cadastral fabric. So I think, if I recall, the slide deck, there was overlapping that potential site with some Crown-owned parcels. If you wanted to go into to measure a distance, say from a parcel to this road, for example, you could access the distance tool here, and you can change the units, whatever makes sense, whether it's imperial or metric. And you can also add that as a drawing to the map. You can measure area, so if you were interested in a couple of these parcels here as your potential development site, you could add those to the map this way and get a relative area, and you can also change the units for those, and you can add them as a drawing, and you can erase them as well. Moving over to the top right of the screen here, there's the ability to add coordinates. So a little bit different than the navigation zoom to coordinates. This one will pan to the map. It will add the actual coordinates as text to the map. So if you've got coordinates and want to label a specific area on the map, you can do that using these manually entered coordinates. Or if you just want to provide reference as you're building your map, use the plot XY, and it'll add the details of that location's XY coordinates in latitude and longitude. If you don't want to have those on your map, you can just hit clear all. Okay, so now we're moving into markup and printing. So this tab allows you to add your own drawings to the map and text, and these could be useful in sketching out proposed development sites, pointing out areas of interest, or highlighting potential data issues that you could then send to the data custodian. As I mentioned, the ways to find out who the owner of the data set is, and if you see something that you don't think is quite right, you could actually create a map with some markup and say, you know, what's up with this location or what have you, or something's missing, and then send it to the data custodian via the metadata record. So adding markup is pretty straightforward. It's just like using any sort of simple drawing program. You can start sketching on the map. You can draw, and you can change the colors and the fill. In order to change the color and fill, line thickness, once you've added to the map, you simply click the edit button here, click edit, and it'll allow you to change the shape and rotate as well. And you can also change the color, as we mentioned. And these tools all work sort of in that same fashion. Whether it's a point, you can change the shape of it, and whether it's a line, you can draw the line and then edit it, or you can draw the line when you start off with. Here it's selecting that buffer I drew earlier. And text is a little bit different because text gives you the ability to change the font and the size and the angle. So if I wanted to add a text label to this potential site here, I could write site, or I could write whatever I wanted. And I could have chose the correct font from the get-go, or I can go back and I can edit it, and I can beef up the size, and I can change the font. I could also, if I wanted to, change the angle and change the color as well, if that makes sense. That's basic. That's sort of the basics of these. You can, of course, you can erase a feature as well. If I wanted to erase a feature, I could click erase, and it'll get rid of it. There is an undo button in case you make a mistake and you've erased something that you actually didn't want to take off the map. So those are the labels. Well, I'll show you one more thing with labeling. So under text, if you recall when I right-clicked for the right-click quick tools here, there's a ability to add some text. That's another way to add text. And if you see here, there's this advanced label options. That will actually allow you to add a feature label that's coming out of the data set that is underlying that point and coming from that attribute or the feature attribute. So, for example, if I want to add something from the local government municipalities data set for that specific location, I can choose a field. So that is Kitimat, and I can add that as a label. And I can go in here and I can edit it as well. So I could say municipality of Kitimat, apply. Whoops, spelled wrong. And then, of course, I can edit it in the same ways that I showed you earlier by clicking edit and then changing the font size and you can also move the text around as well. I did mention, I just want to highlight that again as it's kind of popped up in my window here. This local government symbolization, like that gray line, is maybe hard to see, so you can go in and right-click on any of the data sets and change the symbolization. So maybe I want to make that a really big yellow line. Oops, that's a fill color. So there's yellow. It's going to be pretty big like that. Hit apply. I should change that line there. You can also change how features are symbolized in the sense of, so for parks here, they're just simply symbolized as parks. But if I wanted to symbolize by a unique value, this will go into the features database and give me the attributes that are available. So if I wanted to symbolize by park class, I could create a color ramp and let's go yellow to blue, create unique values. And so now I have a new legend for provincial parks based on the park class. And see, it comes onto the map like that. And so if I zoom out to parks now, you'll see that the parks have different. There we go. That's here. So that park there has a no park class, and this park here has park class A. Just going back to those, to sort of that previous extent. I'm going to turn on imagery before I get into creating a map. So again, over in the markup and printing tab, as I mentioned, you probably will at some point want to be able to print your map. I'm just going to turn off the cadastral fabric here before I do that. I'm also going to turn off these drawings that are on the bottom. Measurements, oops, measurements I'm going to leave. And I'm also going to turn off the ground tenures. So here's my site again. So at this point, if you wanted to print a map, there's two ways to do that. Using the right-click on the mouse, you can export a map image, and you can export it in different formats depending on what the use is, whether it's going to go into a PowerPoint or publication. You can choose the different image format. And this is basically going to go and create a screenshot for you. So I'm going to say yes, and it's going to go open my default browser for this image type. So you should see just a screenshot of that whoops, a particular image, and there we go. And if I wanted to create a map of that area as a PDF format, I click the Print Map button here, and I can choose whether it's a low or high resolution. I can choose the different scales, and I can give it a title here. So I'm just going to call this Webinar Map. And I can preview the extent to see exactly what's going to be on the screen. And I click Print. That's going to go off and generate that PDF, which you can open, and you'll be able to print or save that document once it opens up here. There we go. So it has a legend. You see it says Webinar on the top, and yeah, so that's quite an important function for the BC Economic Atlas. So one more thing I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to pass it back. We've recently added the ability to create custom reports, and these reports perform a spatial query against data that's coming from the BC Geographic Warehouse, and the results of the report are summarized in a web page that you can download as a report. So the only report that we have is this First Nations Consultative Areas Database report. This report is working from the Ministry of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation Consultative Areas Database, and this report can be used to determine preliminary contact information for First Nations that may have Aboriginal interests in a user-defined area of interest. The boundaries of the consultative area database are not public. However, the results of querying the database are. So I'll show you quickly how that works. It's very simple. So if I was interested, I'm a potential developer, and I'm interested in this area here, and I want to know which First Nations that I need to contact and get a preliminary list of contact information. I click the report there. I can add a point, a line, a polygon, or a rectangle. I'm just going to use the rectangle as an example. So if I was interested in this area here, I click Next. It's going to ask me for report names. I'm going to just kind of call this report CAD webinar report. I can also add a buffer to that area that I defined, but because I selected the rectangle outside of my site, I sort of provided my own buffer. Now when I click Submit, it's going to use this shape as a bit of a cookie cutter against the BC Geographic Warehouse CAD data set, and it's going to come back with this report. So if the developer was going to be doing work in this area, they'd want to contact the Kitsalis First Nation and the Haisla First Nation, and there is their contact information. And this is an example of a highly dynamic data set that's being updated all the time. So this is one of those ones where I wouldn't go off and say, oh, I know who to contact for a particular area, because as I mentioned, this data set is very dynamic. So that's one way to find conservation information for First Nations using the BC Economic Atlas. We will soon be adding the ability to select, to run a report from a selected polygon. So for example, if I selected Kitimat, you see that the create a report here is grayed out. Soon we'll have the ability to run a CAD report from a selected polygon, so you don't need to sort of redraw over an area that you may have selected already. And with that, done my demo. I think, as Luke mentioned, we're looking for feedback. I know we're going to have open questions coming up, but feedback of all types, and feedback particularly around data requests and maybe opportunities to partner. And if there are groups that you think that we should be connecting to or showing the Economic Atlas, we'd definitely be interested in hearing from you. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Josh.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's an incredible amount of information that you've covered in a really short amount of time, and it is really clear how incredibly powerful a tool the BC Economic Atlas can be with a little bit of practice. So with that, I think we'll launch into a bit of a question and answer period. So I see a couple have come in just as we've gone through the presentation there, but I'd welcome all of our panelists to turn on their webcams, unmute themselves, and join us for the panel for any questions that may come in. First question here, and I think this would go to Dan. This question's from Dave. Dave asks, can you save queries so you can use them again for future Economic Atlas sessions, or do you have to rebuild them for each session?
If you created a query on a data set through one of the simple query tools or the advanced query tools, and then you saved the session, that selected set of data would still be selected. So if you had selected for industrial and then reopen that map, the industrial selection would still be there. And it would still access the live data source. So if there was new industrial polygons added to that data set, they would be captured in the query when you reopen the map. So that would be the way to save that query. You wouldn't be able to save the SQL, the structured query language, but I mean, you could copy and paste that into a text file if you wanted to, but the results of the query, if they were still in your table of contents or in the information panel, would be saved.
Great, thanks. Christina asks, where will the recording be posted? Everyone who's attended the webinar will receive a follow-up email in about a week sending you a link to our website, which will have the recording right there. So if you'd like to pass on the recording to any of your clients or colleagues, or you just want to watch it again to pick up on a small point you may have missed, you'll certainly find it there, and you'll all be sent that information. If you're really eager to see some of our previous webinars, if you go to gov.bc.ca/economic development, you can navigate your way to the webinar section of the website there, or just by typing in webinar into the search box, that should come up with the Economic Development Division's webinar series and all of the recordings there. Colin asks, yes, the recording has been recorded and it will be accessible to those who didn't attend the presentation. If you registered but did not attend, you'll also receive an email in about a week to where that recording will be. Are there any other questions? I know that was a ton of information, so I'm sure many of you folks are still wrapping your head around all the information, and I think you know, Dan certainly did a good job of covering so many of the potential use cases there. So we'll just give it probably another 20 or 30 seconds or so, just see if any come in. If you're writing a question feverishly, feel free to hit your hand up button, and I'll stay on the line for a few more minutes, and we can let some more questions come in. So Gavin asks, great presentation. Thank you very much, Gavin. Is there a search function to locate communities? Over to you, Dan.
Yes. I still have my, is there a way that I can show the screen again?
Yeah, you're showing it right now.
So at the top right here, there's a search function here. And as I mentioned, you can search by place name here. So if I was interested in, let's see, Cranbrook, I could type that in there. And because I have everything checked here, it'll search for everything that's on the map, but it'll also search for communities. So that's coming out of the municipalities database, but this one's just coming from, here, let me redo that with these ones turned off. It'll just be a little bit clearer for you. So I'll do that again. So there's Cranbrook, the city. If I click on the globe, it will, and then click zoom to feature, it'll zoom me right into, I haven't been to Cranbrook in a while, but I assume that's Cranbrook right there. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's how you would search.
Great, thanks very much, Dan, for that. I appreciate it. Next question is from Karina. She asks, is all the information or data sets available to the public, or some only available to government employees?
I guess I'll take that one on. Everything that you see in the Economic Atlas is public.
So yeah, there you go. I think as Dan alluded to before, though, there are some data sets like the consultative area databases where it'll provide some results, but not necessarily a geospatial result. Is that accurate, Dan?
That's correct. Yeah, because some First Nations don't want to show their consultative areas, just blanket the entire data set is not viewable, but the results of querying the data set are.
Great. Another one here from Christine. She asks, I believe you mentioned it can be a tool to find people to partner with. Can you update your company profile in order to be found more easily by other companies? Or is that perhaps a question relating to the First Nations Economic Development Database?
If it is, that data set, the First Nations Economic Development Database company listings, can be updated through the website fnedd.ca. And that it's a live database where if you have information in there that is stale or is out of date, or you want to add your company, if you are a First Nations owned company, you can add your information through there, and then because we're live linked through the BC Economic Atlas, it'll appear in the Economic Atlas as well.
Great, thanks, Dan. Question here from Kevin. He says, wow, powerful. How would you recommend that we help those serve access? Obviously a little work to use. Is there an expectation the private sector would access self-service, or possibly communities become functional and suggest developers contact to create custom maps? So I'm getting the gist that the question's relating to perhaps tutorials or some other tools to help those get more familiar with the tool and use them a bit more effectively in their economic development efforts.
I can handle that one as well. Yeah, I mean, the tool is designed to be intuitive and easy to use and easy to understand, and there's quite a few help documents available, whether it's the tutorial help document that's on the Economic Atlas homepage at www.gov.bc.ca/economic atlas, or there's also the help documents that are available on the interface as well. We have been touring around Atlas quite a bit through different conferences, but if you have any specific questions, I would encourage you to send them to bcea@gov.bc.ca. That's the BC Economic Atlas team's email address. It's bcea@gov.bc.ca, and we'll help you as best as we can.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, so I think we've just about reached the end of our session. I want to extend a huge thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon, and notably our presenters for taking time to put everything together to showcase this tool, and of course a big thank you to Dale Wilden for joining us and extolling the virtues of this great tool. So Dale, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it. And Luke and Dan, thank you again for your expertise. It's clear it's a really powerful tool, and with a bit of practice, I think it'll make a big difference for assisting communities, developers, economic development officers, and anyone who's looking to do any kind of investment into their community. This is obviously a hugely important tool for making that a lot easier. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, John.